from every corner of the earth sits glorious architecture. Magnificent structures that allegedly have no connection, yet very similar designs. This style of architecture, riddled with elegance and purpose, can be found in your neighborhood or in the middle of nowhere. And when you walk in, you are overwhelmed with a vibrant feeling of serenity, a feeling that modern-day architecture does not provide. The concept of a timeline that once existed, where structures were created with a completely different purpose. Yet, when we take a look back at who they told us built these structures, considering the timeline and the lack of technology, the story begins to crumble. And that story was taught to us all during a time when we were too young to question it. But when you shine an unbiased light upon the history books, you'll quickly uncover the lies of his story. But even before Rockefeller and his goons started the Board of Education, they already had our ancestors, and anyone who questioned their narrative would soon find themselves an unwilling resident of the original indoctrination camps. And where did they come from? Where did we all come from? If knowledge is truly power, then maintaining such power must rely on the absence of knowledge. Are you aware that every major city in America experienced a great fire? Candle fires that turned stone to dust, leaving behind a crime scene that resembles a war zone. Let's take a giant step back, perform our own investigations, question the history that was written by these victors. With a growing nationwide lack of trust for our leaders, it's time to discover the extent of the deceit and where the lie truly began.
What's being kept from us is huge. And you're talking earlier about the architecture. I really like to encourage people to do their research in their own communities, because you really do not have to go far to start chipping away at what they've told us and ask yourself a question: is this even possible? Is it possible that X building was built in the 1890s? And they're giving us timelines of like a year. It was built in a year. They want us to believe we didn't have the technology, that we were low tech, and yet we're building all of these amazing structures. This disparity between what the narrative says and what's actually there.
You have places, cities in America that look as though they were constructed in medieval Europe, when nothing was here and people showed up and just got started building, from what we're told. One would assume that they would build with the means that were available to them. Wood, nails if they were lucky. What we get is this narrative that people were showing up and really making do with what they had.
What we learn about in school is there was nothing here. This land was free for the taking. The only inhabitants were wild Indians, and we built everything here. Everything you see in this country, in North America, because we're talking about Canada too, was built by us. After we got here, nothing here. They had to change the narrative. They had to destroy the evidence. They had to come up with an explanation for who built this, why they built it, when they built it. And they had to do that for a lot of buildings.
We are told that during the 1800s, the consensus of North America was low, extremely low, too low to justify the infrastructure within the timelines they've provided, too low to have the experience or knowledge on crafting these glorious buildings.
They're the most exquisite buildings I've ever seen, and there was only a population of a few thousand people at that time. And then I'm looking and there's mud roads and wooden sidewalks. And then I'm looking at this building that is just, it could be out of Paris or Prague. It's not computing. And so I'm realizing there again, there's a whole bunch of stories that have to be dug into, rethought, reconsidered, and in some cases completely discarded.
We no longer build like that. How does that happen in a realistic timeline? Wouldn't you be progressing year after year to have incredible buildings? Today, we would be building massive pyramids, massive courthouses that last forever. Instead, We have the complete opposite. And they're very cheap. The tools have upgraded supposedly, yet our construction has gotten worse. It's completely backwards.
There's evidence of a worldwide culture that existed in the not too distant past, and the evidence is everywhere. It's an interesting thing because, like, I've spent a lot of my life looking into ancient history and traveling around the world searching into the past, and it isn't until recently that I realised that it's actually, I don't have to travel to Egypt or anywhere. It's all right there in Sydney and in London and in San Francisco, and it's all around the world. And once you see it, you can't unsee it. All you got to do is look at the civilization you're living in with the right type of eyes, and you're sort of looking around your city and you're going, well, hang on, what's this building doing here? And why is there a building just like that in the Philippines? Why is there one in Japan? Apparently Japan's borders were closed, weren't they? Why are we finding what we're told is Greco-Roman style architecture in every country on earth? Was it really Greco-Roman style, or is it evidence of a culture that existed, a worldwide culture that existed right around the world in the not too distant past?
If I took a picture of this building behind me and asked any of these people, where do they think this building is in the world? I guarantee you most of them would say Rome or Europe somewhere. But no, it's right here in San Francisco. We have buildings like this all over the country, and they want us to believe that they were built in the early 1900s or the late 1800s with horse and buggy. And there's just no way that's true. These buildings were built by the prior civilization, master builders, the old world order.
This is the architecture I'm talking about. You'll find this anywhere in New Zealand, Australia, Hong Kong, North America, South America, all over Europe. It doesn't matter where you are, this architecture is replicated. The weird thing is, they akin it to being all built around the 1870s to 1900 mark. So all of the world just shit out of nowhere at the same time. There was nothing before it. Does it make any sense?
I don't think antiquity is a long time ago. I think this civilization went just before us. You know, the Edwardians are supposed to be around the time of the First World War. So within grandparents' living memory, yet we know nothing about them. It's the control mechanism that covers it up with the education system. They got the news, they got the narrative, they got, you know, the mainstream to tell you how things are, but the reality is completely different. History goes to the victors, okay? Somebody invaded this place and took over a beautiful, through jealousy, using trade routes, using the sea, and they took over this place. They covered all of this fine architecture with their iconography. So there's literally been a cover-up of history in more than one way.
If you look at Capitol buildings all over the earth, they look the same. They do. They've got columns, they've got domes. It was not random. And every story we're told in our historical narrative about how a place got started was some guy was the first settler there, bought some land, subdivided it, sold it, and pretty soon you have a city. But the whole narrative is based, especially in North America, that there wasn't anything there, and we built it all.
You could look at it, the whole building was a work of art. So there was obviously some pride that went behind that. It wasn't just about making money and throwing shit up as fast as you could. It was about building with a purpose, and that there was symbolism behind these things.
They built them to last. They built them with a certain level of artistry and attention to detail and customization. You see, now you'll go through a neighborhood and every home looks the same. This neighborhood, perfect example. But everything had its own identity, and it was steeped in customization and ornate attention to detail.
We don't get that now.
You don't get that now.
Even when you look at the beauty of the buildings from that Tartarian era, if people were actually paying for labour, and you had to get carpenters in there, no, you'd never build buildings like that if you were working by an hourly rate. You'd just be getting it functional. People used to build that stuff because they love to build, because beauty is actually a function. Beauty is actually a function of a creation. When you're living in a world of beauty, your soul expands, and it's expansive. You can create. You can become all that you can be. And if you can become all that you can be, you sure as hell don't need rulers. So that's why they don't want you to know about any of this sort of stuff. Oh no, we're at the pinnacle of our civilization now. This is the best it gets. The best we've ever done. Look at the quality of these walls. Hey, fuck that Gothic shit. Look at this. You know? I mean, yeah.
When I was like 8 years old, I started researching the pyramids and stuff because no one knew how they were built, you know? So I started looking into ancient history. And as I said, I'd spent most of my life traveling around the world looking at all these ancient sites, and then suddenly you see this civilization that's right there under your nose. It's been there the whole time in all of our Western cities. They covered everything up. It wasn't just inserting the Dark Ages, they changed everything. So when we start even trying to piece it together through the history that they've given us, how do we know any of these places are even the names that we're told they are? How do we know any of these things? How do we know any of the history is true? Because it's not they just put it all together and just shuffle the deck and throw it out to a bunch of countries and name them whatever they want. So it's become extraordinarily difficult to try to trace it through any mainstream history records. All we've got to really go on is the architecture itself. It wasn't thousands of years ago, it was just hundreds of years ago. Even if you go down to South America and look at some of the temples down there, the edges on them, the beveling on them, this is only a few hundred years old. This is not old ancient structures. These are new walls. I've gone there and looked at them myself. You know, nothing is what they tell us. You know, everything is a lie. It's just how big the lie is. You know, and the bigger the lie is, the easier it is for people to believe it.
There's a lot of architecture in the world today on every continent of buildings that are much, much larger than you would think people of our height would build. And so I gave the example of the Supreme Court building in Washington, D.C. as being one of those buildings. The Basilica, the National Shrine at Catholic University in Washington is another example. A huge, huge building.
Look at the Texas state capitol. It's incredible. You've got these pillars around the whole area. It's kind of the same thing as the Vatican.
I do wonder about Iolani Palace. How old is it? And one thing to look at is it took them 2 years, from 1880 to 1882. How did they build that beautiful, beautiful building? Was it building here longer? Was it here before Captain Cook? There's no construction pictures and there's none of that stuff. So no power tools, horse and buggy. How is that even possible?
When you have St. John's Cathedral in New York City, that's not a style of cathedral. That's the real McCoy.
Could you imagine that being built today? I think that everybody would go crazy.
They have no legitimacy whatsoever, except to trick us and convince us that they do. And that's how they've managed to get away with this. So they could insert themselves in and set themselves up as overlords.
Stone building is not just something you can pick up and teach a convict in a matter of weeks, like we're told about Americas and Australia. Truly, that's how we're told these countries were built.
Just extremely sophisticated and technical engineering involved. And you know, there's so many questions that come to mind. How'd they do it? If they were our size, how could they even accomplish this with the technology we were told we had at the time?
You'll find many of the banks, post offices, government centers, especially 100 years ago, were facilitated in these large, glorious stone structures. So, number one, the rulers wanted the stronger, more durable, more imposing structures for themselves. That sends a message to the people you're ruling over.
Don't believe what we say. Go out in your own communities and do your own research. There's plenty of buildings that they left for us to examine. Once we can all wake up collectively, then we can come to realize what they have truly done to us.